Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our session. Unfortunately, due to the special circumstances that we're all facing, we can't meet face to face. But the organizers have once again done an amazing job setting up this online conference. Now, for our session, we are going to talk about developing critical thinking skills in the online classroom. Now, before we start, let me introduce myself for those of you who I didn't have the chance to meet last year. My name is AKIS PANAYI. I am a Hamilton House teacher trainer, a Cambridge Assessment English presenter. I'm a tutor on the Cambridge CELTA course and an examiner for Cambridge qualifications A1 to B2. For those of you who do Cambridge exams, that's starters, movers, flyers, key, preliminary, and first. But above all, I'm a classroom teacher. Now, for our session, the aims of our session are the following. We are going to address the following questions in as much detail as possible. What is critical thinking? Why teach critical thinking skills? How do I know if my students are critical thinkers? What are lots and hots? These are two terms that we will come across later on in the presentation. Can my course book help me teach critical thinking? We're going to look at some examples from a course book and see how the course book can help and guide the teacher to help the students develop critical thinking skills. What questions can I ask my students to make them think? We're going to look at some questions that you can raise in the classroom to target critical thinking skills, and how is critical thinking interrelated with academic success. Now, let's start with a question: what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is something that we mention to our students. It's something that everybody talks about, but what does it really mean? What is critical thinking? Well, critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally about what to do or what to believe. It includes the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. Now, I highlighted some key words: the word clearly and rationally and reflective and independent. Now, to engage in reflective and independent thinking, first of all, you must have some knowledge of the topic that you're talking about. And in order to be an independent thinker, you must also develop your own judgment. And these are skills that the teacher can help the student develop during their lesson. That's something that we will talk about later more extensively. Some things that other people have said about critical thinking. Critical thinking is, according to Matthew Lipman, skillful, responsible thinking that facilitates good judgment. The highlighted words are words that I find that they are very important to understand what critical thinking really is: skillful, responsible, and good judgment. Anthony Blair has said that critical thinking is recognizing the rules of various sources, making the appropriate evaluative judgment of their reliability, and continually adjusting your beliefs accordingly. Being flexible, that's what it means. Being flexible, being open minded, use various sources, not just one source of information, but various sources, and then use these sources, use this pool of information to adjust your own beliefs and make your own judgment. Now, why teach critical thinking skills? Why is it important to help our students develop critical thinking? There are a couple of reasons. Philosophical reasons, first of all, to produce language. Students need something to talk or write about. That's a philosophical reason. In order to produce language, to produce words, to produce phrases and extended writing, students need something to talk or write about, and they need to have good, solid knowledge of that subject in order to talk or write about it. Compelling ideas, thought provoking topics. The more you read, the more you develop compelling ideas. And this is something that will help students later on in the college or university where they choose to continue their studies. Using your critical thinking skills provides you with your own unique voice. It's what we said before. You use various sources of information, and then you use these sources to make up your own judgment and have your own unique voice and your own opinion about the given topic. And a good teacher makes you think even when you don't want to. That's a famous quote from Robert Fisher. Now, let's have a look at psychological reasons about why teach critical thinking skills. Psychological reasons. Well, critical thinking skills involve solving problems and puzzles. Students need to be able to approach texts critically. It's what we call critical reading. Read something and use your prior knowledge to approach the text that you are currently reading in a critical way. Research paper writing, that's something that, again, the students will be faced with, especially during college or university time. And language learning, like any learning, is enhanced when we challenge the brain to think critically. Now, let's move on to the question, how do I know that the right students are critical thinkers? What are the signs? what should I be looking for to check if my students are actually thinking critically? Well, the students, must have the ability to analyze and evaluate. You give them the information or they read something, they are given the facts, and they have the ability to analyze the facts and evaluate them. They can communicate logically using the information that you have given them. They have the desire to be well informed. They're asking questions, and that's something that we, the teachers, should always do. Encourage the students to ask as many questions as possible. Next, they are honest with themselves. They know what they can do, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, they know that they might not have all the information at hand, but they need something more. That's why they ask and they analyze and evaluate. They're open minded. They are open to new ideas. They are open and they're flexible, and they have the ability to adjust their own beliefs and change their ideas. And they are flexible, as we said. Now, the teachers should encourage independence in all areas of student life. The earlier students develop independence, the more well equipped they are to grow as learners and make connections, both across the content areas and in the world around them. Now, let's talk about theory a little bit more before we move on to more practical things. In all of my workshops, I like to have half the workshop is about theory, and the other half is about more practical things that we can actually do and use in the classroom with our students. Now, I'm sure you are already familiar with this man right here that you can see in the picture. That's Benjamin Bloom. You might not be familiar with his face, but I'm sure you've heard his name before. Well, we can't have a session on critical thinking without mentioning Benjamin Bloom, who's an educational psychologist, and he developed the taxonomy that we are all aware of, and we will have a look at in a moment. Bloom's taxonomy of learning objectives, developed in 1956, is used to define how well a skill or competency is learned or mastered. Now, in 2001, Anderson and Krathwohl aimed to reflect a more active form of thinking. They took Bloom's taxonomy and changed it a little bit, and now we have a more active version of the taxonomy. And in the next slide, you will understand what I'm talking about. In this slide here, we have the two pyramids. The one was created in 1956 by Benjamin Bloom, and the other one is the evaluation and of Bloom's taxonomy, and the new pyramid that we've mentioned before, the new hierarchy of learning objectives, which aimed to reflect a more active form of thinking. The the hierarchy, as we said, is named after Benjamin Bloom, and is a classification, a taxonomy of learning objectives for educators to consider. Now, the two main changes that Anderson and Krathwohl have made to Bloom's taxonomy are the following. First of all, in 1956, Bloom chose to make the taxonomy using nouns to show the hierarchy of learning objectives, starting with knowledge, having knowledge of the information, of the facts, comprehension, then application, analysis, synthesis, and lastly, evaluation. In 2001, Anderson and Krathwohl chose a more active version of learning objectives and have changed the nouns to verbs. So knowledge became to remember the information. Then comprehension became understand, application, apply, analysis, analyze, and then the other major change is that Anderson and Krathwohl chose to change the order of evaluation and synthesis, and they decided that evaluation should come before creation or synthesis. So we have evaluate and then create. Use the information that you have at hand to create something new. Now, these skills, lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills, are categorized as such, as lots and hots, as we call them. So remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. These 6 skills apply to lower order thinking and higher order thinking. What I would like us to do is think which skills are lower order thinking and which skills are higher order thinking. Let's take a moment and think about that. As I'm sure you all realized, lower order thinking skills, or LOTS, are the 3 first skills that we have in the pyramid. Remember, understand, and apply. Basically, gathering information. These are skills that help us gather information. And then higher order thinking skills are the 3 last skills: analyze, evaluate, and create. Processing information. Now, let's look at the lower order thinking skills first and take them one by one. Remembering. What is remembering? Can the student remember the information that we have given them, or they have read in a given text, or they have heard in in a listening text. Then understanding. Can the student explain sufficiently the ideas or the concepts they have read or heard about? And then applying. Can the student use the new information they have in order in another context or in a different task? Moving on to higher order thinking skills, analyzing first. Can the student break the information down into its component parts? Evaluate. Can the student assess the value of the information? And lastly, creating. Can the student use the information to produce something new, as we said before? Now, in order to help our students develop all these skills, we have to raise questions in the classroom during the lesson. What you have here in, in this slide are questions that some of them go with lower order thinking and some of them go with higher order thinking. So we have questions like who, how many, what alternative, why might, what could happen if, when, what, how would you contrast, where, and what would you recommend? We have 10 questions. Five of them help students practice and develop remembering, understanding, and applying the lower order skills. And the other 5 help students develop their ability to analyze, evaluate, and create the higher order thinking skills. Take a moment to think about which questions go with which category, lots or hordes. The lower order thinking skills, the questions that we can use to help our students develop lower order thinking skills are the following questions: who, what, where, when, and how many. And the higher order thinking skills can be developed with questions like why might, what would you recommend, what alternative, what could happen if, and how would you contrast? You can see how the level of challenge increases as we move from lower order to higher order. Higher order thinking skills require students to think more critically and analyze and evaluate and create. Now, all critical thinking skills are important at all levels of language competency. For example, we can practice higher order thinking skills at low language levels, as well as lower order thinking skills at high language levels. And there are plenty of examples of this. What I would like you to do now is look at the following example that we have here for you from the new Hamilton House series Ultimate. And this course book is targeted at B1 level. And this is an example taken from Unit 2. In this in this page, in this unit, students will listen and read about haunted houses. And what I would like us to do is look at the tasks one by one to see how a good course book can help the teacher teach critical thinking skills, and how these skills are implemented in the tasks. Now, in the first task that we have here, students listen to the podcast and complete the notes. They listen to information about haunted houses, so they understand information, and then they have to use their understanding of the information to complete the gaps and complete the notes. That's low level thinking skills. Then what they have to do is, in the next exercise, they have to label the photos, as we can read in the instructions of the task. Label the photos in exercise 1. Would you still like to visit one of these two houses, A or B? Why and why not? Now, this task helps them with the application of the information that they were given previously. They understood the information, and now they have to apply this information. And the teacher can raise more questions here, like how would you use, or what examples can you find to support your opinion, and definitely encourage students to answer the question that is written here, why and why not. In the next task, after the students have listened to the information, now they read about haunted houses. They gather more information. And the task here asks them to read the text and note down 5 things that interested you the most. So what they have to do here, we move from low-level thinking skills to high-level thinking skills, where they have to analyze the information that they read in the text here. They have to analyze the information and note down 5 things that interested them the most. And of course, the teacher here can help the students and ask them the question of why, to have the students reason about the choice with questions like, what are the parts or what are the features of the text that made you give this answer? Or why do you think this? Or what motive is there? And so on and so forth. Lastly, in this final task, in this page, we move from gathering information to processing information. And the final task asks students to use the information that they have heard and read before to create something new. And this is a good example of how we move from low-level thinking to high-level thinking. As you can see in the instructions, the students are asked to prepare the next episode of the World's Most Haunted Houses podcast. And they are asked to go online and find information about haunted houses in other countries, and then prepare a presentation. The task asks them to include information like where the house is, what it is called, when it was built, who lives or who lived there, and what is unusual about it. Of course, the teacher can add many more questions to that list according to your students' abilities. This is a good example of how a course book can become a great tool for the teacher to teach critical thinking skills. We moved from understanding information, applying the information, analyzing the information, and then use all that to create something of our own. There are many more questions that the teacher can raise during the lesson to help students develop low-level thinking skills and high-level thinking skills, starting from knowledge, as you can see in this slide, to test a student's knowledge of the information. You can raise questions like, can you list 4 things, or 3 things, or 2? Can you select something? What is, when did, which one, and where is? To test comprehension, to test students' understanding, you can ask questions like, can you explain what is happening? And how would you compare? Or what facts show this? Or which is the best answer? And how would you summarize? For a student to be able to answer, to be able to summarize a piece of information shows that they have understood, they comprehend the information. Then we move on to testing the student's ability to apply the information with questions like, how would you use, or how would you apply this to develop that? And what other way would you plan to do something? What elements would you use to change this? Then we move on to analysis with questions like, how would you classify? Or why do you think this? Or what evidence can you find? And how is this related to that? And lastly, what conclusions can you draw? For a student to be able to draw conclusions, it means that they can analyze, they have good solid knowledge of the information, and they can analyze it and draw conclusions. Then we move on to evaluation. To be able to evaluate, we can help students with this by raising questions like, how would you justify? Or do you agree with the outcomes? And what is your opinion of this? And what choice would you have made if you were in this character's position? What choice would you have made? These are the kind of questions that make students think more critically about what they have read or what they have heard. And lastly, to test the student's ability to create with questions such as, what changes would you make to this? And how would you test something? We can, um, going back to the example of the haunted house, we can ask the student after they have read the information to create their own test, which then they can give to their partner, and the partner can do the test, and the student who made it can check their partner's understanding. Moving on to the next question, can you propose an alternative? So we can ask students to give us a different version, an alternative ending maybe to a story. And lastly, suppose you could do this, what would you do? Again, another question that helps students think. Now, let's move on to the online classroom at this point. And let me say that while teaching critical thinking in an online environment is indeed a new challenge for many educators who who have never worked outside the physical classroom, like many of us, the guiding principles to teach critical thinking are are much the same. Basically, the teacher should demonstrate the skills that they wish to teach and provide opportunities for analysis, evaluation, and creation. Everything that we have mentioned and have seen before in the previous slides. Also, the teacher should incorporate higher order thinking in their assessment. For example, you can ask a student to analyze or evaluate or create something and assess their piece of writing. And we will look at an example later on of how you can do that. Evaluate work based on analysis rather than memorization. What we said, do not assess or test your students only on their memorization of the facts, but on their evaluation and analysis and the use of the facts to create something. And encourage students to ask questions. Moving on, provide students with additional resources that are exemplars of critical thinking skills. Teachers should assure students that there is not always a single correct answer and that their reasoning is more important. Their reasoning is valid. And that's what we should assess them on their reasoning and not on memorization. Provide extra resources for additional support, and you can accept assignments in various forms, PDF or Word document, PowerPoint, even video. Yeah, you can You can ask a student who maybe they are not so good in PowerPoint presentations. They can do it orally. They can record a video and send it to you. That's also okay. And give them the opportunity for resubmissions and retakes. If a student fails to show that they have mastered a concept or a skill, you can provide a fair and unpenalized opportunity to try again. And in that second opportunity that they have to show that they include self-reflection and they have considered their approach to the task that you have given them. Now, let's have a quick overview of what we have said in this session. Critical thinking, both lower order thinking and higher order thinking, can be taught at all language levels. Higher order thinking requires students to do something with the facts and not to simply memorize them. Critical thinking skills are key for success in university and college. Having said that, academic success depends on the student's ability to do the following things, among other things: deriving knowledge from collected data, make educated judgments, synthesize information from various sources, and often deliver insightful presentations. Therefore, we as teachers should teach students how to use new information to analyze, evaluate, and create. The three parts of the higher order thinking skills. But don't forget that it is equally important to remember, understand, and apply the information. The skills in the lower order thinking. So both, both sets of skills are equally important. To be able to analyze, evaluate, and create, first you have to remember, understand, and apply. I hope you found this session useful. Thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we will meet again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.